top 5 mysterious events caught on video.
Our world needs us, champion. Our world, place your hand upon the stone when you're ready.
I remember the awakening. How life sprang forth all around us. I remember unity, until it was shattered by betrayal. I remember fleeing to keep him from his prize. The time for hiding is over. Aid me, or everything ends.
The Life Binder. Somehow, she's the key to Sargeras's plan. Azeroth cries out in pain.
Him.
The Legion believes itself entrenched on Argus, untouchable. Reward their arrogance with suffering.
Did you know that in Dalaran, there are little crows on the signs of all the buildings that allow rogues secret passage to their order hall? If you're a rogue and can't seem to remember which building will let you get back to the order hall, just run along looking at all the signs until you find one with a crow on it. Now, let's go on to some more lucrative things. Did you know that the Blood Elf and Draenei starting zones are on the same map as Outlands? If you're able to avoid dying to fatigue, it's possible to fly from Outlands to one of the starting zones. Of course, I'd assume you'd automatically dismount though if you made it that far, seeing as those 2 starter zones are some of the few no-fly zones left in the game. In the footage you're seeing, you can see me traveling from the Blood Elf starting zone all the way to Netherstorm. It's quite a far trip though, even going at 4 times flying mount speed. And the fog of war makes it so you can't really see anything until you get close.
Champion
but if you remove the fog of war, it's a lot easier to see the
silence its cacophony.
If you fly directly behind the Dark Portal of Hellfire Peninsula, you can make your way to the Ghost
Yes, you have
You'd
them
think
reeling.
since both the Blood Elf starting
Well
zone
fought.
and the Draenei starting zones are technically in Azeroth, that they'd be on Azeroth. But in reality, you just get teleported to Outlands every time you go to those zones. Of course, it makes sense since both those zones were introduced with the Burning Crusade and Outlands. But as far as I know, I don't think the Death Knight starting zone is in Northrend. Next, we'll talk about the Worgen starting zone glitch. Before patch 5.4, if you swam out far enough in the Worgen starting zone and died, it would send you to the default Alliance graveyard in Westfall. For those of you who don't know, if you die in a weird way or the game glitches out, there are 2 default graveyards for both Alliance and Horde. Westfall for Alliance and the Barrens for the Horde. So next time you die and wonder why you were sent to Westfall or the Barrens even though you were in a completely different continent, now you know why. The game just sent you to the default graveyard because something messed up. Anyway, back to the Worgen glitch. Before patch 5.4, if you were able to die in the starting zone and be sent back to Westfall, you could actually level up to max level without ever getting any of your Worgen racials, including your Worgen form. This was the
Eredar
only way to play as a
sorcerers
human
twist the
druid
fell
if you
blood of
really
this
wanted
world
to
into
play as a
weapons
druid with
to
no
use
racials
against
that
us.
always look like a human.
They must be
If you
dismantled.
try it today, you'll just automatically gain all the Worgen racials as soon as you enter combat for the first time, rather than waiting for the appropriate quest in the Worgen starting zone to give them to you. In the alpha build of WoW, you could see an untextured version of Nax inside Stratholme. This makes sense, since at the time, Blizzard had a hard-on for putting raids inside dungeons. Both Molten Core and BRD were both raids inside of other dungeons in vanilla. So having Nax being inside Stratholme wasn't even all that weird of an idea, and would have been met with a, "oh, okay," response if it had happened. But instead, Nax was moved to an outdoor place, and then later moved again to Northrend with Wrath of the Lich King. But did you know, the untextured version of Nax inside of Old Stratholme is still in the game? The outdoor version of Stratholme is blocked off from flying with an invisible wall that also doesn't allow you to get behind the city either. But if you manage to get inside the outdoor version of Stratholme, you can find the untextured version of Nax in the same spot it was in the alpha version of WoW. Now, why is it there, you might ask? Well, who knows? But my guess was that Blizzard just copy-pasted the old alpha version of Stratholme during the Cataclysm Old Zone revamp for the outdoor version of Strat and just kind of left it as is. And then just blocked off flying in the area so no one would notice. Speaking of alpha WoW, in the alpha version of WoW, Blizzard would just place the Dark Portal as a placeholder for instances that weren't complete yet. Out of all the placeholders placed in alpha WoW, all of them except one eventually became a raid dungeon or battleground. The only place that never received anything was the placeholder underwater in Azshara. What does this mean? Well, that Blizzard most likely had some plans for some kind of instance content that had to do with Azshara. Maybe a Naga raid with Azshara herself, seen as Queen Azshara is one of Warcraft's oldest and never properly addressed threats. Seriously, Queen Azshara is a hella strong Naga mage who has the backing of an old god. It's not a matter of if she will be put into the game, but more of a matter of when. Even in Legion, WoW's current expansion, you only deal with her minions and talk to a clone of her in a quest chain. And that's the most we've heard of Azshara in all of WoW's history.
No!
Blizzard has been teasing Azshara for ages and still hasn't done nothing.
For our great master!
Considering how things are going in Legion, and the whispers heard in a certain raid, you might finally be seeing something with her sometime soon.
My
enough about that. Let's get back to the alpha.
For the Legion!
What could Blizzard have been planning so early on in the game with Azara? Well, it's pretty likely it was the entrance to a battleground. The Zone of Azara was originally planned as a battleground similar to Dota or League of Legends. Groups of 5 players on both sides completing objectives in a MOBA-style PvP battleground. But it was never actually implemented despite being teased many times over the years. That is the most likely explanation for the placeholder portal underwater. But why would there be a portal to a battleground that takes place on land and be underwater?
We
That's where
will
the
see the
mystery of the
Legion's
placeholder comes in.
end, even if we
It
must
could
tear
very often
Argus
just
itself
belonging to the
asunder.
ill-fated battleground, but its location suggests maybe it was something else. My best guess was that it was an early version of an underwater raid or dungeon, which probably would have sucked with vanilla shitty raid mechanics, which is why it was scrapped early on. I mean, have you done the bombing run quest in the Hellfire Peninsula? It's the earliest version of a vehicle quest in the game ever since Cataclysm removed all the vanilla quests. It takes forever to get to the location, you have to use the item to bomb people from your bag, and the bomb itself has a long cooldown. Blizzard thought the quest was so good, it's one of the few repeatable quests in that zone. You know, just in case players want to do the quest over and over because they thought it was just so good. All that to say, I don't think Blizzard really would have been able to pull off an underwater dungeon with their game mechanics at the time. They could probably pull it off today though. Speaking of content teased for ages but never implemented, if you look at early screenshots of the Emerald Dream expansion, you can see this particular statue in a few of them. After killing Xavius in the Emerald Nightmare, the nightmare will be cleansed and you get to see a small part of the Emerald Dream. And in this small little pocket of the dream, you can see the statue that was in all those screenshots ages ago. This is more of a little Easter egg than a hidden thing. But did you also know Shadow Priests get a special little RP dialogue? If you go into the cave and click on a flower, your weapon will tell you in so many words that the last prison is weakened, and the old god will be breaking out soon. Combine this little thing with the whispers from Il'gynoth, and it's pretty heavily hinted that we'll be fighting Inzoth soon, as he's the only old god that hasn't been dealt with in game yet. On a small island in the Krasser-Rank Wilds in Pandaria, you can find an island with no NPCs or quests. But there are signs on the island with a red frog on them. If you explore the island, you'll find tons of frogs. Critters, no battle pets, just heaps and heaps of frogs everywhere. This place is more commonly known as Frog Island by the few people who know of it. Since there aren't any quest, objectives, achievements, or battle pets there, you'd never know of it unless you just explore the island for yourself randomly. Apparently, if you kill the frogs, they have a very quick respawn timer. But if you kill too many of them, you'll spawn an elite frog mob who can only cast one spell, Frog Justice, which instantly kills you. Why does this island exist? Why are there so many frogs? Who placed the signs on the island warning of the frogs? Who's the frog guardian that kills the intruders that kill too many of his friends? All very mysterious things, making it a very neat little hidden place. The hidden ghost city of Caer Daro. If you've ever headed to Skullamonts, you may have noticed an abandoned city in front of a dungeon. Not too far-fetched of an idea, if you know even a tiny bit about the backstory behind Skullamonts. Plus the zone it's in is full of ruin and undead. But did you know there is actually an entire town of ghosts there? You probably didn't, since there isn't a way to see them anymore in the game. The only way to see the ghosts was to complete a quest to get an item that you could then equip, which would then allow you to see and talk to the ghosts. One of the ghosts even sells rare recipes. But you can no longer do the quest chain to get the item, so if you didn't already have the item before it was removed in Cataclysm, there's nothing you can do. Now, I don't have the item either, but my priest does have an old trinket from Molten Core called the Eye of Divinity, which allows me to see pretty much all ghosts in the game that require special items to see. And that's how I'm getting the footage you see now. The Eye of Divinity no longer drops from Molten Core though, and I think it only ever dropped for priests, so not many people have it either. So those ghosts are mostly hidden from WoW now. But you might be thinking, everyone who played in vanilla knew about the ghosts. Well, there are tons of people who play WoW now who didn't play back then when this was common knowledge. You have to remember, vanilla WoW was over 10 years ago now, and it's been at least 6 years since the quest chain was removed from the game. On the Isle of Thunder, off on one of the corners of the Thunder King's palace, is a wall worm. The only way to get to him, since you can't fly on the island, is to do some wall jumping on the tree nearby. Once you finally get to him and talk to it, he'll say, "Hello," and if you ask if he meant to say hello, he'll tell you, "Nah, I said hello, but that's close enough. Bye now." This little exchange is in reference to the movie Labyrinth, where a similar scene plays out with a talking worm on a wall. The Forbidding Sea Mountain. In the Azeroth Highlands, to the east of the map, is a large mountain range. If you fly into the middle of the mountains, you'll come across a giant open space of grass, and the map will tell you that you're in the Forbidding Sea, even though you're clearly on top of a mountain. Before Cataclysm, most mountaintops were just untextured land masses, and when they added flying to the old world in Cataclysm, Blizzard didn't really bother revamping huge areas that no one ever went to. It seems instead of just making the mountains have a normal mountaintop, they just added grass. It's a nice, big open area too, so it seems like a great place to hold large meetings if you want no one else to show up, since there's no quest or anything that send you near it. If you go further southeast of the Forbidding Sea Mountain, you'll find a small farm being run by dwarves. I don't think there are any quests or anything connected to this place either, but I could be wrong, seeing as I don't really play Alliance. But I'm pretty sure it's just a random hidden farm with no relevance to it. And that's it for hidden things in WoW. I know some of these things weren't really hidden things and more Easter eggs or glitches, but I mean both of those things can technically be considered things, like with a more broader definition. I should also mention there are tons of hidden ghosts in the world besides the little town I'm in. I made a video about some of those, I'll link at the end of it. 10 things that might make playing the game a little bit easier. At number 10, we've got the Traveler's Tundra Mammoth and the Repair Yak. At the cheap price of 20,000 gold, or 16k if you have the rep, you can get your very own portable repair van. As long as you're outside, that is. If there's one thing everyone should have, it's one of these mounts. I mean, technically, it's not really necessary as long as you're not too lazy to just go to the repair vendor on your own. And it's only useful in some raids, since you need to be outside to use it. But, well, that argument can be used for pretty much anything that makes life more convenient. The argument of, well, it's not really needed. And that's true to some extent, but that doesn't discount its usefulness either. And if we were to place the Repair Mammoth on a scale of usefulness, I'd put it at like a 6.5 out of 10. As for the Repair Yak, which also has a transmog vendor on it, I'd place that at a 9.5 out of 10, because sometimes you just gotta change your outfit in the wild, and you don't want to have to go back to a major city. At least with the repairs, there are engineering bots and stuff that can do that as well, but there is no other alternative to changing your transmog outside of major cities. Well, at least I don't think there is. Back when the Yak was a Reforger mount instead of a transmogger, I'd put it at a 10 out of 10 in usefulness. I get called to go outside of the raid all the time because I was the only one in the group rich enough to afford the 120k mount at the time, which was a lot of gold to have back then, before WoD's garrison inflation. Because for a hot minute in WoW, you could change some of the stats on your gear. That was fun. Whatever happened to that? Number 9, the Gnomish Army Knife and the Thermal Anvil. I'll be honest with you, my general strategy when making top 10s is to start off the list with obvious or interesting things to get them out of the way and to draw viewer attention. That way I can talk about the more obscure stuff in the middle, and then end the list off with the best parts, like an ordered list should end off with. That is to say, it's pretty obvious that engineering stuff would show up on the list, since the profession is all about making parts of the game more convenient. I know I leveled up engineering on new tunes just to use the looter ring. Makes grabbing loot so much easier, especially in ranged classes. And of course Jeeves and the portable mailbox will never stop being useful too. But no, this spot on the list is for the Army Knife and the Anvil. The Army Knife was a lot more convenient back in Wrath when it was introduced, as many professions actually still needed professional tools to actually do their crafts with. Just so you know, you no longer have to use a mining pick to mine, a skinning knife to skin, or a fishing pole to fish. I mentioned this in another video and a lot of people were shocked about the change, despite it being in the game for a while now. Now, some professions still do use tools for them, so the army knife is still useful. Plus, it was a way for DPS classes to res players, as it was also a res device. Well, for engineers anyway. And to top it all off, creating the knife was one of the easiest ways to level engineering at a certain point, so there were tons of them on the auction house for cheap. Many people use this thing for ages, and I bet some old school players still have it in their bags. In Warlords of Draenor, they introduced an upgraded version called the Ultimate Gnomish Army Knife, which added a few tools for other professions, but without a res function. Well, there is an engineering version of it that does res, and it has a higher chance to res than the 66% chance to res the old army knife had. Also, the thermal anvil is pretty neat. It acts as both an anvil and a forge, so you can do engineering stuff from anywhere. It can drop from a Blinkatron gift package, so they're cheap to buy, and each one has 20 charges. Number 8 on the list is Little Ragnaros. For the cheap price of only $15, you can buy a little rag from the pet store, and while he's out, he acts as a cooking fire. No longer do you have to wait a few seconds to create a cooking fire. Now you can just summon one out instantly. Of course, if you don't want to fork over $15 for an instant cooking fire, you could always just buy Peri off the auction house instead. It serves the same purpose, an instant cooking fire in the form of a pet. But out of the two, which one is better? As some of you may or may not know, I also run a pet battle channel where I almost exclusively do PvP pet battle videos. Out of Little Ragnaros and Peri, Little Ragnaros is miles better than Peri. Little Rag is one of the only 2 pets in the game who can lay out a trap spell. Traps in pet battles will randomly go off at the start of a round over the course of the next 9 rounds, and instantly stun the pet and do good damage to them. The great thing about this is that the stun will happen at the start of their turn, stopping them from doing anything that turn, plus the next turn as the stun will carry over, giving you 2 free turns to attack with impunity. The only other pet in the game who can use a trap spell is a pet you can only get during Children's Week, and is also good for the same reason. Plus, Little Ragnaros also has the highest attack power value of any other pet in the game, making him a crazy hard hitter with a good moveset. Is WoW Pet Battle pay to win, considering this great pet is also a cooking fire? Well, not really. There are tons of easy to get pets that are better than Ragnaros, but he is still a top tier pet. Peri is not though. He's kinda bad in PvP. On a scale of usefulness, I'd put Little Rag at a 3 out of 10. Very quality of life. Number 7, Drums of Fury. An item actually useful compared to Little Ragnaros. Drums of Fury gives you a lesser version of Bloodlust or Heroism, at 25% extra haste instead of 30% for 40 seconds. If you're doing Mythic Plus dungeons without a class that can use Bloodlust, this would be one of the most needed items to bring after flask potions, food buffs and shit. Maybe even more important, the fact that they give 5% less haste isn't really a big deal, as it's still pretty good at 25%, and for 40 seconds to boot. It's always better to have an inferior Bloodlust than none at all. Also, they aren't really that expensive to make as long as you put garrison resources into the mats used for them. And of course, have a leather worker to make them. Number 6, the Drennic Swiftness Potion and the Dark Moon Firewater. There are a lot of useful potions and elixirs, but of all of them, I always carry around a stack of Swiftness Potions. Not only do they give a 70% speed boost for 8 seconds, but they also give a 200% swim speed boost. That's faster than the Swift Speed Potion that only gives 100% extra swim speed. But to be fair, that one does last for 20 seconds, while the Drennic Swiftness Potion only lasts for 8 seconds. While the run speed portion is nice too, I mainly use this potion for its swim speed effect. There is a lot of water in the Broken Isles, and Suramar has a ton of little waterways that you can jump into to escape the guards. I usually just head straight to the nearest body of water whenever my disguise gets broken, and pop this potion and just outswim everything. And since there aren't a lot of other guards in or around the water, it's real easy to get away without pulling more of them. There are obviously other and better methods to get away, but this potion helps with a lot of other random shit too, since it does also have a decent run speed increase. The other potion, Darkmoon Firewater, is also pretty convenient, but in a different way. I only have it on the list with the Swiftness potion because they're both potions. Well, kinda. Darkmoon Firewater will reduce your gathering time for skinning by 1 second, and mining/herbalism by 1.5 seconds, making gathering nodes a lot quicker. And it works in all zones, including the Broken Isles. It also slightly increases your size, if you're into that kind of thing. The potion can only be obtained during the Darkmoon Fair, but can be sold, so you can just buy some off the auction house. Number 5, Mobile Banking. Long ago, in the glory days of Cataclysm, guild perks used to be extremely useful and plentiful. Then, about 90% of them were removed over the next 2 expansions, with only 5 remaining today. Of the remaining 5, I'd say mobile banking is probably one of the most useful ones, depending on your access to the guild bank in your guild, that is. The mobile bank, of course, just allows you to access your guild bank for 5 minutes on a 1-hour cooldown. Mobile banking is all kinds of useful in raids, and I'm pretty sure I've seen at least 1 dropped every single time I've done a raid, since everyone in your guild can use anyone's mobile bank. Hasty Hearth is also pretty neat. Only having a 15-minute cooldown on your Hearthstone instead of 30 minutes is pretty handy. Guild Mail is pretty convenient too, makes trading with guildies a lot easier and convenient. Mount Up allows you to not really need a mount speed increase since none of them stack. And the Quicken the Dead, well, that one's garbage. It used to be good though, believe it or not. It used to give 100% extra speed while dead, and not just the 10% it gives now. Number 4, the Stonehide Leather Barding. The Stonehide Leather Barding is an item created by leatherworkers that allows you to not be dismounted from being dazed while running through a pack of mobs. Sounds really simple, right? Well, it's usually the simple things that are the most useful. With this item, you can just speed run through mobs in Siramar where there are a ton of people who can dispel your illusions, and not worry about eventually being dismounted. This item also lasts for 2 hours and through death.
Or worse.
8 hours if you're a leatherworker, so you can just set it and forget it. Number 3, the Goblin Glider Kit, an Emerald Winds toy. The Glider Kit, on a short cooldown, will propel you forward and slow fall you for 2 minutes. It's relatively cheap to buy or make, and I always carry around a stack since it's great to use in the Broken Isles from high places. I also use the Kite toy, which has the same effect, but that one has a 15-minute cooldown, so it's nice to have both. Emerald Winds is a toy you can get from hitting all 10 green orbs in Aviana's minigame in High Mountain that will propel you forwards and allow you to jump continuously as long as you're in the air. Combine Emerald Winds with any slow fall, and you can essentially fly in the Broken Isles as long as you do it from a high place. Probably one of the most useful item combinations from Legion, even if it's not as good as it was before a few other toys were nerfed. Although I probably wouldn't call them the most useful items in Legion. That honor would probably go to the Flightmaster's Whistle, but everyone kind of gets that for free, so I kind of just left it off the list, despite its amazing.
My children will cook you
Number
up
2,
nicely.
Water Striders. These mounts can be obtained by doing a lot of fishing dailies in Pandaria or Draenor that allow you to simply walk on water while riding them. Arguably one of the most useful items to have while traveling around the Broken Isles currently, as there's just lots of random pools of water everywhere. Both mounts can be used everywhere except Battlegrounds, and thankfully escaped the region lock nerfs a lot of useful items got hit with. For those of you who don't know, at the start of Legion a bunch of toys and items got hit with zone-specific restrictions, when before they could be used anywhere. But enough people threw a fit over the Water Strider mounts that Blizzard left them alone, which is great. But if they hadn't hit so many items with those nerfs, I might have had a few different items on this list, because there were a ton that used to be useful but now are kind of meh with their zone restrictions. And number 1 on this list, the most useful item in the game, is teleportation items. There are so many of them, but a lot of them are hard to get. I'm pretty sure most people have the Dalaran, Garrison, and normal Hearthstone, giving you 3 teleports right out the gate baseline. Then there's the many rings you can get to teleport to various locations, like the 2 rings for the $2 ends. The old world Dalaran is a lot cheaper to buy. the Brawlers Guild ring, the Guild Cloak that gives you a nice and easy to get teleport back to either Stormwind or Orc, depending on your faction, that can simply be bought from a guild vendor. My personal favorite teleport, Jaina's Locket, allows me to create a portal to Old Dalaran without cooldown, which I use whenever I need to get to an auction house, since it's the only teleport I have on my priest that doesn't require me to equip something.
The Legion is reeling from your onslaught.
There are also 2 tabards that have
down.
teleportations tied to them. The Tol Barad and Argent Crusade tabards. The Tol Barad one will teleport you to your faction quest hub, which will be right in front of a port to your major city, so it's another easy and quick way to get to Ord for Stormwind. The Argent Crusade tabard simply takes you to the Argent Crusade Northrend. Only really useful if you want to do dailies there, or want a quick way to get to Oldor or ICC for the great price. Then there's all the engineering teleports. My hunter is an engineer with the 2 tabards I mentioned earlier, giving him almost as many ports to places as my mage. There's the wormhole generator for Northrend, which allows you to choose which zone you want to teleport to. The one for Storm Peaks, by the way, takes you right to the entrance of Ulduar. The Pandaren wormhole generator isn't as useful, as it takes you to a random area in Pandaria, but still useful as a tool for getting there if you don't have another portal, or don't want to use the one in Ord or Stormwind. Then, depending on whether or not you're a Goblin or Gnomish engineer, you get 2 more teleports, one to a vanilla zone and one to a zone in the Burning Crusade.
Eyes see all.
The Burning Legion conquers all! Outmatched and outdone. Miserable wretches! The hour of doom is at hand!
Now is your chance. Finish this fight! Well done, heroes. You've driven the Legion from this world. The hour has come at last. There is no sacrifice too great. A new invasion point harbors a Legion commander. Go and deliver vengeance.
Legion forces swarm this area. Drive them out and strike a blow for the light. Crucial target lies ahead. Strike it down in the name of the light.
Chaos reigns.
When they push us, we push back harder. To victory!
Kill you! Take your things! Yes! Yes! Trinkets! Give them to me!
Well fought. In our long struggle against the demons, we must savor every victory.
How are you? See you around.
Greetings. Be careful.
And bam!
The light guides my sword.
At your service.
I am the blade of the light.
At your service.
The hand of Argus stands with you. The hand of Argus stands with you.
At your service.
The hand of Argus stands with you.
Arcanon Poros. Do not lose faith.